I'm on a direction. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, but I know I'm going north or north by northwest. And I'm open to the possibility that there's going to be something wonderful out there.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode of Work, Life, Play. Today, my guests are designers, authors, and fellow journeymen on this hunt for finding work we love is Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. They wrote a sequel book on designing your work life. In their first book, I interviewed them, sounds like it was 3.5 years ago. And it was on designing your life. And they use these design principles that I've used heavily in my life and in work. And we had another conversation today, which is really fun. So their first book went on to be a New York Times bestseller. They've sold 500,000 copies. Some 100+ university college systems around the world teach the course on designing your life. And we were able to huddle and connect. So we talk about joy, about reframing, about dysfunctional beliefs, about thriving, about having a bias towards action and being led by curiosity, about how to choose thinking that is actually empowering for the life that you want and the purpose that you want in your life, about autonomy, about getting off the treadmill of more. I know you'll enjoy it.
So you're saying neither book in the beginning were ever a possibility if it were left to Dave?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had been teaching for 5 or 6 years, I think, and the class started to get bigger, and we'd always had one of the missions of the lab was get this stuff off campus. And they said, "Well, let's write a book." And Dave said, "No, we're not going to." I think it took me 2 years to convince him to even outline one. And then
one succeeded in killing it for 2 years.
Yeah, and then one summer I finally said, let's outline this thing, and we outlined 10 chapters because it's a 10-week class. And
no, Bill, you said you'd fire me if I didn't write the book.
Well, yeah, I said you really, I think this is a responsibility. And then we wrote a bad book, and then we found an agent, and then we wrote a better book, and that was fun. And then when we got to the second, our publisher actually said, "Hey guys, this book is going pretty well. Let's get another book," and we proposed a couple different things. We ended up on the book on work.
It's not a book, it's a movement. We got to keep the movement going. Send me a list of second titles you might be able to write for us.
We down selected to the book on work. Our agent had a brainstorming session, and Dave arrived saying, "I know you're going to try to talk me into writing another book, and I'll brainstorm with you with this. Under no circumstances, are you going to trick me into this again?"
I'm just here in support of my friend Bill. Bill likes to ideate with me. I'm one of his favorite ideation partners, and we do that together really well. And Bill thinks writing another book is interesting. Again, I don't. So I'm here to help Bill have ideas. But once we have them, you guys can write the book.
So what was it about? Was it the actual book writing process, Dave, that you don't enjoy or didn't enjoy? Was it the laboriousness of holing up in hotels for weeks at a time? Like what is it that you were resisting?
Boy, I wish I could give you a mature cause and effect answer, and I can make one up. But the absolute truth is, this probably fits into a broad category of problems with Dave that are often evidenced when Bill sneaks up behind me and leans into my ear and says, "Dave, I think we're having an accept problem again."
That's right.
Bill, I've often complimented Bill does reality almost better than anybody alive I've ever met. And I tend to like things on my own terms. And so the reality was that we had written a successful book, and it was a big deal, and it was going to take some time to support it. And so the reason I didn't want to write the second book was largely I didn't want to accept being an author. And it was a lot of work, and I can write, but it's not a natural act, and it's a ton of effort, and I just don't want to go through it all again. But the real issue was I just hadn't accepted we'd become successful authors.
Okay, so let's start there, using your own methodologies of reframing. The reframe is the ability to pivot, right, in our thinking. It isn't to tell a fictitious story or trick ourselves into believing something different.
No, not at all.
It is a genuine, from a root perspective shift. So using that as an example, then what became your root perspective shift that enabled for this book to be in my hand today?
So the pivot I made was, frankly, away from looking primarily at the work. It's a lot of work And in many ways, it's unnatural work for me. I mean, writing isn't natural for me. Thinking up ideas is, and whiteboarding is, and talking is for sure, but writing isn't. First of all, we are successful authors. What does that mean? That means lots of people are asking this question and like the ideas that we're sharing with them to respond to them. So would you like to talk some more with hundreds of thousands of people who have real issues that they think you could be helpful on? And I love being helpful. So I just pivoted away from the work and on to the served constituency. But that pivot required accepting that we apparently write books that people read.
Well, actually, and I don't know if Dave remembers this. There were two steps. First, it was outright denial. And then it was this reframe to like, well, if this would be useful and people would, we could do something useful, that'd be great. And then, as you recall, you were convinced we had absolutely no ideas. I said, well, let's get together, whiteboard. You know how that we like to do that whiteboard thing. Let's get together. And then within 40 minutes, Dave had filled a whiteboard. We both had filled a whiteboard, and Dave had dozens of ideas about what this book was about.
We had this brainstorm meeting that I'm dragged into as Bill's assistant. I'm not going to work on the book. We come up with a list of titles. We send it off to the publisher. We all kind of bet what title we think they're going to pick. So it's really a spec book. The publisher wants book number 2. And then the book they picked, neither of us had bet on, the book on work. And then we got together. And the first thing I said, Bill, we're screwed. We're totally screwed. We thought up this time. I have no idea what this book is. We've not taught this. We don't have this class. We don't, we have nothing to work from. We got so much work to do. And he goes, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's just, come on, we'll just do the ideation, And literally, it was about 20 minutes later, we had a table of contents.
I think it does hit on the subject of curiosity, because we are both deeply curious about how our students are doing, particularly nowadays in this COVID situation. And, and we evolved this simplified methodology that designing your life and even designing your work life is really, first you get curious, because curiosity, as you were saying, Aaron, is that energy that pulls us to try something new. So get curious, talk to people, which is the, prototype conversations, try stuff, prototype experiences, go out in the world. The world is where we can, prototype our ideas. And then tell your story, because as you connect into these networks of people, storytelling is how you create this virtuous circle of, curiosity leads to prototypes. Prototypes lead to stories lead to more. I'm more curious about more things.
What I think is fascinating for me, and I'd love for you to bring us into a specific story or a couple specific stories, is in the beginning of your career, you guys are both in technology and software, so you use design principles. Then you were in academia, and you were bringing that to life for students, one of the most popular classes. Then you move into workshops, and then your sphere of influences increases. Well, now fast forward, your universe is much larger than it was. And many. So one of the things you mentioned in book number 2 here is about how it's everything from helicopter pilots, moms, retirees, like you covered, like it was a really good list, priests, school teachers, nurses, like pick one. Yeah. So, and what I loved about it is that you brought it together to say, this is actually a human condition. There's a human condition about asking the question of, how do I have more happiness, joy, meaning, purpose, connection, fulfillment in my life? And, oh, by the way, this is a really simple way you can begin to activate these things in your life so that you can. So take us into a story and walk us through, because I think what happens sometimes for listeners, especially in the podcast world, is it's endless sea of guests who have great tips about how things can be better. Right. I think the difference is I'm a practitioner of the work that you guys profess, and I'd love for them to hear, our listeners, how you see this in particular people's lives making a daily difference.
I'll give you an anecdote, just a sort of one-liner, and then a bit of a story. For me, the one-on-one story is really, it's great that 500,000 people have a copy of the book, but, talk to me individually, how's it going for you? We got an email from a woman who said, I just want to thank you guys. I'm married to this lovely man, have been for 38 years, but unfortunately, during all those growing up years, he listened when his parents again and again and again told him he's just no damn good. And he believed them. And so I love him, but he's been stuck for a very long time. And I just have to tell you, I got him your book, and he's unstuck for the first time in 38 years. Thank you. I mean, it literally brought me to tears. And I have no idea what idea it was or how he got unstuck. But I think that, and here's a guy who's been receiving help and of all kinds, who knows, and getting nowhere. And why he's getting nowhere, I mean, I have a strong conviction about this. I think the reason our stuff's working for some people, and this word of mouth thing, like we'll go to a book talk, and then we sign some books out, and people stand in line for an hour to get the book signed, illegibly by me and legibly by Bill, and they will tell you not just thank you for the book, but then I gave it to my son, and I have a box of 30 in my trunk, and I give them away all the time, and then they tell you I gave it to my son, and he gave it to his girlfriend, and she gave it to her dentist and her dentist's daughter, and then they will tell you not just that's where the book went, but the detailed story of the dentist's daughter.
That is a revolution. That is like a certifiable revolution, right? It's hand-to-hand combat.
And I keep thinking, what is going on here? Well, what's going on here is the human conditions, exactly what you said. And design thinking's proper name is human-centered design, HCD. And I keep saying, if you get the human part right, you nailed it. And I think our stuff resonates with people because it is fundamentally more human than those other dysfunctional belief, but exciting and inspiring ideas that simply don't really work. One example would be one of my daughters works, doing women's empowerment stuff through sport in the townships outside of Cape Town, South Africa. And she was, meeting a colleague in another organization who was doing some work. And gee, how did you get into this? She said, well, you got to understand, I was doing this other stuff. I was in the business world, and then I read this book and blah, blah. And then she goes, my stepdad wrote that book. And she goes, oh my God, what? And so she goes on into how she literally did, step one, step two, step three. So I realized I didn't want to do this anymore. I don't have to be stuck, and I'm going to get curious, and I'm going to reach out and talk to a bunch of people. And oh my God, they called back, and I had these conversations, and eventually there was an offer, and I did this project, and they said it was good. And here I am now living the life I chose because I was able to actually do those steps. They were doable.
Yeah.
And they gave me the hopefulness that I could pull it off. So if we give you enough hope to give it a try,
yes,
and tools that when you try them actually have progress, and you just repeat, stuff happens.
Yeah.
Our wonderful editor at Knopf, Vicki Wilson, she said, this book is hopeful. And I don't think we had thought of it that way. We didn't really see it that way. But it's one of the things that comes back over and over again. So anyway, I'll just get this email through our website. I just wanted to thank you in all caps for this lifeline. I was just fired this past Friday. As a single mother of 3 kids, I'm sad and terrified. It's a stage of loss where I'm finding it hard to get happy or excited about anything. But I forced myself to go for a walk with the dog and listen to the first couple of chapters of your book today. Not only do I feel inspired, but I love that you wove humor into the book. It feels good to laugh right now. I'm sure you've received hundreds or maybe thousands of similar messages, but know that this book is certainly a major piece of the puzzle for me as I redesign a life that I can be proud of and feel secure in. And no, it's great to hear that I'm in good company and that most of the world is also still busy figuring it out. Sincerely, Liz. It's like, so it's hopeful. It's not pedantic. We say we don't shit on our students. We don't tell our students what to do. We don't tell anybody in the book what to do. We try to make it lighthearted and a bit humorous. I'm glad people find it funny. And that it brings a sense of like, I can actually do this stuff.
Totally.
This isn't some 1, 2, 3 formula. I'm going to be great like, some self-help guru is going to make me great. All the agencies with the reader, one of our favorite first reviews was, it's clear that the authors respect the autonomy of the reader and don't tell us what to do. We don't tell the students what to do. We don't do it in the classroom. We just give you ideas and tools. You're the designer of your life. I got a compass. I'm on a direction. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, but I know I'm going north, or north by northwest. And I'm open to the possibility that there's going to be something wonderful out there. And if you can start with that kind of curiosity about the world and have a little bit of direction set, we just give you basic stuff you can do. People find their own thing. Dave was saying, purpose isn't a location; it's a state of being. You want to say that again, Dave?
Well, I got asked to talk to a big college crowd about finding your purpose, and I said I'd love to talk about that. My first suggestion is don't. I don't find your purpose, because like so many of these lofty ideas, the question is errantly framed around some kind of exclusivity. I have to find my one true purpose, and then I will be okay.
And there's one answer.
Yeah, I got to find that purpose, and everything else is pointless till I do, and then I got to go implement it. As opposed to no. Look, there's lots of ways to live in the world that are purposefully minded, that are value consistent with you, that are coherent and meaningful. What you want to do is you want to be a purposeful person. So learn the skill and the art of purposefulness, and live that way. And by the way, if you know how to do this, you could honestly plan 3 purposeful lives that are all available to you, and then you get to choose which one to live into. So on the purpose question, purpose is a way, it's not a thing. I don't have a purpose. I try to do things purposefully. That's the counsel we try to give.
One of the things I'm noting is that because you're offering all of these invitations, this hopeful invitation to this woman, it was a lovely letter, who just lost her job.
Right.
And my experience running this morning, listening to the book as well, was the same thing. Is like, this is hopeful. This is more hopeful than the first. And it wasn't that the first wasn't hopeful. I think the first I would wrap up as possibility.
Right.
And so far where I'm at in this book is hopeful, linking hopeful and possible. And what do I do now? And I'm finding that link really helpful. So what I'm curious about is, what is it that occurred in your journeys together individually over the last 3.5 years from book 1 to book 2? You're infusing that as the authors. So what is it that you discovered as it relates to hope that came out in the work that you've produced?
When I got the email, my copy of the email that Bill just read from this woman, which was about the second book, the Designing Your Work-Life book, I responded, to Bill and to our writer and to our agent, Doug, and said, wow, but I got to be honest with you, I wouldn't have seen this one coming. I didn't know we were writing a hopeful book, and I don't think I knew we were writing a more hopeful book. When we started writing to the worker, my premise now, I just thought this up in real time, we know we're talking to somebody who's stuck.
Mm.
In the first book, you may not be stuck. You're just at an inflection point of transition, about to retire, about to graduate. That's not stuck. That's just like a moment in time. But boy, the worker book is about somebody who's probably in pain and probably stuck. And I think we really do believe, well, you have more agency than you might think. There are ways you can apply that agency faster than you think, and it might have more impact on your life than you think. Stay with us, kid. We got something for you. And that is a hopeful stance. But I was just trying to be effective. I don't think I was trying to be cheerful. I think, frankly, when you hear people trying to be cheerful, it's annoying.
I'll tell you one other big thing that's happened since the first book. Dave has been ramping down a little bit his teaching at Stanford because he's got lots of grandkids and a boat and likes to do fun stuff. But one of the goals of the lab has always been, let's get this off campus. And the book was one version. And one of the things we've been doing is teaching other universities how to teach this class. Because as soon as we started doing it, Dave and I were flooded with requests, and we just didn't know how to deal with it when it was just me and Dave and trying to teach 6 or 7 classes. But now we got the lab, and we run what's called the transfer studio, and we have transferred this class to about 120 plus universities. We sent the lab to Thailand. They're teaching it in Thailand. We've sent the lab to Australia. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is that we get to serve a much bigger community. And what we're seeing is that this kind of ideas and tools, a little bit of structure, is even more helpful and more impactful if you don't have a dad who went to college or an uncle you can call and say, how do I get a job?
Oh, because it's just like blank. It's blue sky.
Yeah, you don't have a network into that group of people. And, mom and dad maybe aren't as educated, or maybe it's a brand new immigrant family or something. Mm. So that's the stuff that really got me excited about the next book, about a book about work, is that it looked like it wasn't just, that like smart people or knowledge workers could do this. I mean, we've got a fast food shift supervisor in the book. We've got, Dave's got a story about a truck driver. We really wanted it to be every worker. Dave and I will both tell you, we got pretty shitty advice when we were in college about what to do. I got lucky because I accidentally picked a major I liked, and then I was, off to the races, and Dave was unhappy because he picked a major for which there were no jobs for until 20 years later. But I mean, when you hang out with the students we hang out with, and people come to workshops and stuff, and just look at the amount of, kind of needless pain and stuckness, and, it's not working out, and I'm trying so hard, and I don't know what to do. And to give people one, how about just a reframing tool and prototyping? We had a guy come up to us at a book signing, and he goes, prototyping. It's a really big deal. And we go, yeah, we know.
Turns out.
Tell everybody, you can prototype anything. And I said, well, I'm signing your book.
I think it's in there. Yeah.
I think it's in there. For me, I've been a designer for 35, 40 years. So like, of course you build prototypes. Of course you don't go with your first idea. The other big thing that tends to really unlock people is they go, you mean I can have more than one plan?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, I can just pivot.
For people that haven't read the books, say more about that particular truth.
In the first book, the big idea is around the exercise called the Odyssey Plan, where on a single 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, in 15 minutes, we will facilitate you coming up with 3 completely different ideas about how to live the next 5 years of your life. I literally remember the ideation session when Bill and I were in the class. We were talking about coming up with this Odyssey Plan thing. So we're going to do this. And we started characterizing what the Odyssey Plan would look like. And then Bill goes, yeah, but we got to do 3. And I went, of course, probably the most single important decision we ever made took about 14, microseconds because it was so obvious, because there's not just one of you. So the line we use all the time is there's more aliveness in each of us than one lifetime permits you to express, i.e. there must be more than one of you in there.
So good.
You're not going to have time to let them all out. So let's give a couple of you.
Let's give voice to a couple of them right now.
Give voice to a couple of them right now, and then start prototyping into lots of them, and a combination of not just what's the right one or the best one or the one you really want, because it may not even anywhere near be that simple. It's not linear, but it also is a combination of what the world's interested in now and that kind of thing. So this starts this empirical process of prototyping to go out and actually start building a life. But the idea is you're not just one thing.
So one of the things I run into continually, and I'm sure you do also, is people that are far down an already path, a decade, 2, 3, whatever it may be. Oftentimes it's a career field, and that they're heavily vested in that career field, both from experience as well as compensation, and maybe even reward. So everything from retirement to stock options. Then you add all of the externals, the mortgage payments and all those things, right? So this idea of designing your life can feel like, in my experience working with them, is that like a luxury for young people. Luxury for young people, or maybe a forced upset. So like, oh, well, yeah, an event happened in your life, a crisis. So you lost your job, you have to. Or someone in your family died. Or it's a sunset plan of what to do. I have a buddy of mine who just retired a couple months ago. So he can design his life in the next chapter. But it's kind of like a way that they dismiss themselves from participating in life design because of all of the precursors I just mentioned.
Sure.
So back to, we would agree there's some dysfunctional beliefs in there. But what is it that you've learned now in interacting with thousands of people? Ways that you can begin to get agreement, even in the smallest ways, to prototype, to reframe, to run a risk. Like, walk us through that.
One of the things that's been surprising to me is when we run workshops, and I say, who's unhappy with their job? They raise your hand. And 9 out of 10 times, it's someone who's actually pretty successful, at least outside looking in. We were doing a big workshop in New York, and a woman raised her hand, and what's the matter? She said, oh, I hate my job, but there's nothing I can do. And I'm thinking, she's got a menial job. And no, she's she's managing partner at a big law firm in New York. I said, what's the matter? She said, I hate it. Well, how'd you get here? Well, I went to Stanford because I'm at the Stanford event, and that was hard to get into. So the hardest law school was Yale, so I got into that. And the hardest law firm to get into was this big, white shoe firm in New York. So I got in that. I was the youngest female partner, youngest managing partner. I just got all the brass rings. I won everything. I'm at the top of the pile, and I hate it. And so it's this thing you were talking about. She's in a very professional track, super invested a lot of money and time and education, and in getting through all the various, rungs of the ladder. But nowhere in that process did she stop and check to see if she was on course, right? When I asked her why she was stuck, she said, well, you don't understand. Everybody tells me I have a perfect life. I got a house in Manhattan. I got a nice car. We got a place out on Long Island. The kids are in private schools. I'm making 7 figures. I said, but you're unhappy. She said, yeah, but everybody tells me I should be happy. So I think one of the sticking points isn't literally that I'm forced to change or I just got laid off. That's, 45 million people in this country are going to be out of work in a little while. It's often that you got stuck because you didn't ask yourself the question, does this still feel like I'm on a purposeful path? Does this still feel like a good thing? And so, private equity folks, lawyers, people who are making lots of money, who did play the game, got to the top of the pile, but don't value any of those things. They're truly stuck. Now, not stuck like I'm out of a job. She's got lots of money. She could bank, a couple $1 million, sell the place in Long Island and go become a macrame artist if she wanted to. But she can't let go of the social value of her job.
At an identity level.
At an identity level. And the Odyssey plan we have one Odyssey plan is, what would you do if you didn't care what people think? You had enough money, but you didn't care what people think about you. And the people who are in that situation can't do that plan.
Yeah. It does intersect those things about the stories that we tell ourselves, the identity that we hold, the social circles that we roll in, right? All those things. For especially people that do have some privilege of choice in that way. What do you find about that? And I know, Dave, that you want to build on this, is I'm curious about what do you find about at least helping people make that conscious that they are choosing the life they have in terms of their ownership of, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, but it is a choice versus I'm a victim in the story.
Yeah. And in fact, we've been talking about designing your COVID life recently, and step one is all about acceptance. In fact, I'm calling it get real. You just got to really get into reality. And there are three kinds of acceptance. There's oppressive acceptance. Okay, well, they're going to do it to me, which is acquiescing, and now I'm a victim. There's suppressive acceptance. Okay, I got this. The hero, just go. I'm just going to take it. I'm going to take it. I got this. And that brings all kinds of psychological damage, because eventually you break. And then there's engaged acceptance, like, oh, okay, well, let's dance with whoever came to the party and see what's going on here. And only the engaged acceptance is generative. So you can hear that as people, particularly the person stuck all the way down a road and thinks it's too far to back up, right? So I can't go back now. Well, we're not saying about going back. We say you could change lanes. Bill and I've often said about 90% of office hours is people asking permission. I mean, do you think I should just drop my law practice and go over and do this, this tech thing? I go, I don't know. What do you think? It was, well, I mean, could I? And Bill and I are apparently in charge. People ask us permission all the time. So when I see people coming up and confronting us with that question, it's almost not unfair to say that they largely fall in two categories. Like they really want to, their soul already believes they can. They just need a little activation. Like, I don't know, sounds to me like you think you could. I do sound like that, don't I? Well, you do to me. How about to you? How do you sound to you? I think I sound like I want to do this. Oh, why don't you say that? I want to do this. Oh, apparently you want to do this. What do I want to do with that? Oh, should I do this? Well, you want to. I have those kinds of conversations. I don't tell them anything.
What a great coach you are, Dave.
And then, so there's that person, and then there's the person like, there's no way. There's just no way. And I kind of go, and what they're listening, where the hell do you get off telling me I could change? What are you lying to me about this? I go, well, I mean, if you can't change, I'm okay. I accept that. See, you're full of crap. I kind of go, okay, that's fine.
And you're saying, like in that regard too, like back to the question is sometimes people run hard at you.
Oh yeah.
When you're the messenger for the invitation and the possibility.
I think what that is, frankly, I'm not certified to be a psychologist, but it's fear. I mean, fear is right behind anger 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
They've actually soothed themselves to respond to the pain of their unlikable life by saying they have no choice.
Mm.
And then we acted as though they did. And if they allow themselves to believe that's true, now they have to take responsibility for something they don't want to take responsibility for. They might do a bunch of work they don't have to do because change isn't easy. And they'd be much happier knowing they had to be unhappy. Don't you dare burden me with thinking I might be able to be happier. I'm really happy being totally unhappy that I can't be happy. Some people just aren't happy unless they're unhappy. Yeah. Now, if you're that person, you need to debunk us because you have to kill off the possibility that frees you from having to take responsibility. So some people get angry at us because we're acting like they have agency that they don't want to accept.
There's the old joke about the psychologist. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
But
when people say this won't work for me, I go, okay, return the book, get your money back. I don't know. That's what we want me to do.
That's so good. I think it is really honorable work, what you guys are up to, that you're offering a hopeful alternative. And I suspect that some of the reason maybe that hope didn't resonate with you as a core message intentionally was that the opener of the book is specifically at the Gallup poll. It's for those that are disengaged. It's for those that are actively upset and actively withdrawing from their work. And so anyone who finds themselves in a situation where they would feel stuck, or in my case, it's not too distant in the rearview mirror where I felt stuck, that I resonate with it as a hopeful level. Whereas I wonder for each of you, because you guys have been in the Matrix, Morpheus hands out red pills and blue pills. You guys have been pushing red pills for a long time, and they're normal to you. And not everybody takes them. Right. Some people would prefer their blue pill and wake up tomorrow as if none of this happened. But for those of us who need a little permission slip from a guide who's been there before, you guys are, usually as the perfect candidates for that. So it's like the hero's journey. And we need guides along the way who are empathetic to our plight to be able to help us and remember what we already know to be true. We just sometimes need to name it and need some help doing so.
A lot of what we are doing for other people, particularly in these one-on-one conversations, when we're engaging this material and actually working with somebody who might want to change their life one way or another, it's not the guidance and the wisdom we're giving them that's facilitating the process. It's the fact that we are respecting them enough that our approach doesn't scare them that we're going to judge them, and it doesn't scare them that we're going to tell them the answer. So we're safe to talk to because we're willing to be helpful without being prescriptive. And very few people are these days. You can be patronizing, or you can try to be substantively helpful without being prescriptive. And we worked very hard to occupy that spot, not too much, not what I call the Goldilocks spot, not too hot, not too cold. At that point, the primary thing we are actually doing as individuals in front of that person is trying to just facilitate their own clarity on their moment, and give them a chance to hear from themselves. You can't do this alone. We talk about design teams. We put strangers in groups of 3 who do astonishing work with each other, having met each other 1 minute ago. What you really need is another human being who's willing to stand on your ground, on your terms, in a thoughtful, reflective way. You don't have to be Bill or Dave. The university didn't believe anybody but Bill or Dave could teach the class we teach. We said, no, that's not true. We're good at it, but it's not about us. So I thought a thoughtful design team partner can absolutely be as useful and as effective as sitting down with Aaron McHugh.
The very, very first prototype we did with 6 students on a couple of Wednesday nights when we were all said and done, and the students wouldn't leave. One of the students said very forcefully, "You don't understand. We don't have any place to have this conversation." Every time we get people in a triad, people in a group of 6, people in a room, the number one thing they say is, "Wow, that was a great set of conversations I just had today. I've never had a place to have these kinds of conversations. You set up such a safe place and such a nice place for us to do this." And I met these really interesting strangers who are all on the same journey, and it's so good to know I'm not alone. And isn't that just the fundamental human need, to know we're not alone? Even if it's, not alone in the cosmic sense, is there a God or whatever, but how about just not alone in hating my job? People want to help each other. They really do. They're so kind to each other. Thousands of students in hundreds of classes. Sure. I don't think we've had more than once or twice where we had to pull a kid aside and said, "Hey, you're being a jerk."
And what you're naming there is the human quality of goodness in all of us. And when it's amplified one to another, one of the things I've been looking forward to in this conversation with you guys is because of how your work has occupied my life and become integrated into who I've become as a person, I'd love to tell you a story.
Okay.
I'll give you the story version I would tell my friends. Fair?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So 9.5 years ago, our middle daughter had passed away. She was 11. So I have 3 kids, and our oldest, 5 years ago, was in drug and alcohol treatment. Daughter had passed away before that. I'm at the top of my career in a software tech company, traveling globally. and gone a lot, running revenue. So stress, anxiety, our life was just a pressure cooker all the time. And when I looked at these big questions, like, well, what do I want to do? What I looked at was, how can that coexist with what I need to do? And what I needed to do is keep my family together and keep our marriage together, those kinds of things. So what was really beautiful was at about 5 years ago when our son was in drug and alcohol treatment center, it looked like he was going to get better and he was doing better. My marriage was starting to stabilize from being really thin and really challenging. We started asking these big questions, which started with what if? Well, what if, as a reframe? What if the worst's already happened to us? What becomes possible? We're like, well, I don't know. We never thought about that because we're so busy grieving all that had happened, which was we needed to do and has continued. But it was really fun to begin to say, well, we had this marriage coach that we saw. I was telling her about the book I was reading with you guys. And she was like, well, what if you just started with a blank sheet of paper? What would you put on it? And we decided to start riffing on what would the life look like that we would want to live into. And so we literally started drawing pictures. Like, we'd love to live in a small house that I can afford the mortgage by falling out of bed and working part-time, like from a mortgage payment standpoint. Like, let's right size our expenses to accommodate the lifestyle we want to have. Because I want to have agency, freedom of choice, margin, more than I want to drive the latest fancy car. So we went through and created a values map. What are the values that we hold? And how do our decisions then intersect those? So we kind of basically started iterating through this process of what if design. And then, well, what would we want our relationships to look like? Who would be in our life? Who are the life-giving ones? Who are the life-sucking ones? Like, if you could just kind of take an eraser to your relationships, which ones would we just get rid of if you had a do-over here? It was so fun. Now, this is many, 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 many months. So then we looked at geographically, where do we want to live? And we were like, well, maybe we'll buy like one of those touring vans that a band has, and we'll tour the country and live in this RV. So we were like, no, let's check that off the list. That's not one of our Odyssey plans we want to move forward with. Fast forward in my career life, I just was like, you know what I really want to do? I want the work I do every day to be in line with the person that I've become, and the impact I make on the world is on the humans themselves. And so fast forward, we sold everything we owned, like everything, like a 5-bedroom house down to a 1-car garage. We could fit everything in there. And we launched and just went into the unknown to see what would happen. So we worked at a camp, we volunteered, et cetera, couch surfed with people for different periods of time. And dude, it was bumpy, like super bumpy, like maritally bumpy. So fast forward today, kids are great, son is sober, marriage 27 years. I work for McKinsey as an affiliate consultant for them, doing design work for transformations in organizations with CEOs and their executive teams. And all of that was on these lists of possibilities, but not in our current view. So I just want to affirm the work that you guys are doing. It works, it matters, and it's made a real difference in my life.
That's a great story. It's very heartwarming.
The hardest part was letting go.
Yeah.
Now, it was scary. It was scary as hell doing it, but the letting go was the hardest part.
All right, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Bill and Dave, and you now are emboldened to take the next step. So order their book. You can find it at anywhere you buy books, and at designingsyour.life. You can find all things how to design your work and your life. And it's really, really, really applicable, real life stuff that you can use to make a difference and start authoring your life and influencing it as a designer in a really powerful way.